I don't know if you guys noticed it, but the United States and Russia are literally in a war. A proxy war, that is. And while it may seem insignificant, it's not. It's very significant. Never in the entire history of US-Russia relations has there ever been such a blatant Cold War going on, if you will. Even in the Cold War, when the United States and the Soviet Union were at each other's necks, even when the United States supplied the Mujahideen fighters in Afghanistan and the Soviets supplied the North Vietnamese against US forces, they were never so blatant about these supplies and these clandestine operations. That's the whole point. They were actually clandestine operations. They weren't so blatant about supporting the opponent of another nuclear-armed state. That's apparently not what's going on now. As we well know, the collective West, mainly the United States, has sent tens of billions of dollars to Ukraine in its war against Russia. In fact, from February 24th, 2022 to February 3rd, 2023, the US has provided over $29.3 billion in military assistance to Ukraine. To put it in perspective, that's more than Israel's entire defense budget. And $84.2 billion has been supplied to Ukraine globally, including financial aid, humanitarian aid, and military aid. Now, with all these billions and billions of dollars going to Ukraine's military, you would think that the war would be over by now. If the Russian military is performing so abysmally, and if they suck so bad, if the Russian soldiers have no training, if they have no strategy, if the Russians are just dingbats running in a combat field getting slayed, why is the war still going on? It's been over a year. It's been tens and tens of billions of dollars that we've been pumping into this Ukrainian war machine. The military aid to Ukraine is not the problem. The West's stupidity is the problem. Ukraine was invaded by Russia, and for many people argue controversy. Some people say the West instituted the Maidan Revolution, therefore the pro-Russian government was overthrown and a pro-Western one was put in place. Some people say that the Ukrainian people legitimately wanted to join the EU and legitimately wanted a pro-Western government. I don't care which narrative is right. Right now there is a lack of a coherent strategy on Ukraine, and that's why this war is still going on and will continue to go on. Whoever has the big idea of just pumping billions of dollars into Ukraine without a strategy has to be the biggest political loser of the 21st century. I'm not saying that to be rude, I'm being real. We all like to quote him, but do we actually follow what he says? Sun Tzu said, "Tactics without strategy is the noise before defeat." And if you really think the West is exempt from this, think again. This same stupidity caused the West to lose multiple conflicts, including Vietnam, Afghanistan, and a slew of other conflicts. The reason why is because there's no legitimate strategy on how to actually handle this. The West is pitting themselves against Russia, for crying out loud. This is not some rebel fighters in Afghanistan or Iraq. This is the Russian Federation, and no matter how dismally their militaries perform, they are still a country with thousands of tanks and billions upon billions of dollars to pull from. You have to have a strategy when dealing with a military power like Russia. If Russia is still fighting the war in Ukraine, after tens upon tens of billions of dollars from the collective West being sent to Ukraine, plus Western intelligence aid to the Ukrainians, and possibly even Western special forces on the ground, and the Russians are still there fighting, involving this proxy war with the collective West, they're probably a military power. This is not something Pakistan could pull off. So yes, Russia's a military power, just not nearly on the level of the United States, so we think. But as I said before, the problem with this is there's no coherent strategy. There's no strategy. When has President Biden outlined the strategy? He doesn't outline the strategy. You know what he says? We're going to support Ukraine as long as it takes. And he goes on. That's not a strategy. We're going to support Ukraine as long as it takes? What do we mean by support Ukraine as long as it takes? Are we going to support them in retaking Crimea? Are we trying to drive them to the February 23rd, 2022 lines? What does this mean? There's no defined strategy, and if the West doesn't have a strategy, they cannot logically expect to win. Let me remind you about the country we in the West are dealing with. We're dealing with the Russian Federation. This is the same country that lost millions of men in Operation Barbarossa, but still ended up taking Berlin from the Germans. This is a country who does not put a high emphasis on human life. This is a country who does not take defeat easily. This is a country who's willing to sacrifice hundreds of thousands of casualties to achieve their strategic aims. Meanwhile, in the West, when a couple soldiers die, and let me say this from the outset, I'm not saying this with any disrespect to the military. I have utmost respect for the people who serve in the military. They protect the country, and they are legitimate heroes. They're actually fighting out there for the country. Mad respect for that. But military soldiers dying is a part of war. Casualties is a part of war. And in the West, when a few soldiers die, everyone gets out, runs to their cry closet, grabs their protest sign, or even worse, gets on Twitter and starts voicing their opinion, bagging on the government, bagging on the military, bagging on what we're doing to the other people we're in a war against. You don't catch that stuff in Russia. And this is why the West loses wars. If you don't believe me, take it from somebody who defeated the West in a war. Ho Chi Minh said this when replying to a question about how North Vietnam could fight the West. This is what he said, I kid you not, and I quote, "They will kill a great many of us. We will kill a few of them. They will tire of it first." Does that sound familiar? Let me repeat that. They will kill a great many of us. We will kill a few of them. They will tire of it first. That is the West in a nutshell for you. You already have countries in Western Europe on the low talking about cutting aid to Ukraine because they're spending billions of dollars and it's inconveniencing their economy just a bit. And these countries are the same countries that are supposedly going to stand up and bring a NATO wave into a war with Russia? What are you talking about? Let me give you a brief rundown on the major players in NATO and their military. Germany's military is so weak. Germany, one of the major economic players in NATO and the EU, hardly has enough ammunition for 2 days of warfare. France's military is perhaps the most powerful in Europe, but is not made for modern conflict, and their military has been almost exclusively focused on low-intensity conflicts, such as Afghanistan and Mali. That's not real warfare. That's not what we're seeing in Ukraine. It was said of the British military half a year ago that they would be out of ammo in 2 weeks. Now people are saying they'll be out of ammo in 5 days. Italy, their military goes without saying. But I want you guys to actually picture the Italian military trying to fight the Russians in Ukraine. The United States military is the most powerful military in the world. Yes, America is a massive juggernaut. And America would smash Russia in theory. But theoretically only. Because if America is not willing to pay the price, if America is not willing to lose possibly tens of thousands of soldiers to smash the Russians, they'll lose. Not because they're weaker, not because they can't obliterate the Russians. The Russians have proven themselves a quite easy foe to obliterate for a modern military. But because America is not willing to pay the price, the society is not willing to pay the price. You really think the modern Gen Z kids care about what's going on in Ukraine? They probably don't. And you really think these millennials are going to want to be giving their tax dollars to fight Russia over the Donbass? Probably not. I'm not trying to diminish the Ukrainians at all. I'm being real. The West is not ready for a war with Russia. The West people psychologically are not ready for a war with Russia. The West people emotionally are not ready for a war with Russia. And the West, we have a problem with this word. You know what that word is? Commitment. When you go to war, you have to be committed. You didn't catch people in World War II complaining about having to fight Nazi Germany. Russia may not be the same thing as Nazi Germany, but my point is the American people, the Brits, and even the Canadians were all willing to fight to stop Nazi Germany. This is not the attitude you're going to find practically anywhere in the West. So the people aren't ready for a war. We don't have any real strategy in the war. At least it doesn't seem that way. We're just pumping billions of dollars in Ukraine. You combine those two, and the best thing the West can hope to get from this war is a stalemate. Not because we lack the ability to defeat Russia, because we don't have a strategy and we're not committed. Go ask your friend. Better yet, go ask his or her friends what they think about Ukraine. If they even know what's going on in Ukraine, they may repeat the CNN headline, "Oh, we need to support Ukraine to the end." Then ask them how they feel if the war in Ukraine started taking $30 out of their monthly money, or $100 out. I promise you, that right there toasts their motivation. So without a strategy, without the motivation to people, without commitment, you can't expect to win a war or a proxy war. The best you can hope for is stalemate. They need to get their act together now before it's too late. That's all I got for you guys today. Stay tuned for the next episode we have coming out. Be sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel. That way you're not missing out on any updates we have coming at you guys. Stay tuned for new content. God bless, and I'll catch you next time.